Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and today we are taking a look at my second run through Moons Out Goons Out 2024, generously presented by TNVC, Tactical Night Vision Company. I did my first run during the staff match. This run I did during the main match. So we're going to start with Stage 2, Hot Extract. I am running a Q Boombox, which is essentially a Honey Badger scaled up to the SR25 magazine system. It's chambered for 8.6 Blackout, and it is a freaking amazing rifle. And on top of it, I put on an AGM Clarion thermal scope. Now, actually, both of those pieces were loaned to me by their respective companies. So we'll talk about how they performed as we go through the stage here. This first stage, though, is kind of a perfect encompassing of how the match, like all the issues I had in the match overall. So as you saw with those first targets, even though the steel was cold, it was super visible and very distinctive, very easy to hit with the thermal. Now, having moved the dummy, we're going to start driving uprange in the Humvee, and you have a chance to continue shooting, and every hit you get is a 5-second bonus. And I managed to get, I think, 3. Yeah, there's the third one. So this was a really fun part of the stage. We had more driving and shooting in the Humvee than we did last year, that's always a fun thing to do. Now, we got a little bit of a safety procedure here. I'm going to hand my rifle off to the RO while we drive around a corner in some of the more populated area of the stage. And then I have, we're going to drive past 3 pistol bays with falling poppers in them, 2 poppers each, 6 total. And I have to hit them as we go by. Now, the problem here is those poppers are really hard to see. As you can see from the inset thermal, you can kind of spot that one. I did manage to hit that one. But man, the rest of these, I just had a really hard time seeing. That freeze there on the thermal, by the way, that's called a nuke. Thermal scopes do freeze and reset themselves periodically. It's kind of a thing. Generally, it's not long enough to cause a real problem. Never really did for me this time. But I just wasn't able to distinguish those poppers. So every one of those that I missed was a 60-second penalty. That is a total of 5 60-second penalties on this stage. So a fantastic way to start off the match. At this point, the Humvee stops at the end of the bay, and you just have to run down range and put 4 hits on a steel target from a sequence of holes in a VTAC barricade. And this, again, was super easy because, as you'll see here in just a moment, there it is, that steel target is super easy to see, even though it's not heated. So this is our first stage. I was fresh. Other than the poppers, the steel was easy to see. This was a good stage. It was a good stage, except for the 5 penalties I got. We do have to reload here. I'm taking my time to reload because we do have a rule that you have to retain all of your gear. That's basically logistical so that we're not picking up looking for people's mags in the dark. There's my last 4 hits. And there you go. Most people were able to get those poppers, especially people in the active division. So 5 penalties put me down in 98th place. Now, our second stage, the Hesco House of Death, sponsored by Refuge Medical. This one, you actually don't use your own gun at all. You start by running up to this drag dummy. He has a rifle, a magazine of ammunition, and a tourniquet on him. And when you get up to him, the RO will tell you what limb you need to tourniquet, and you have to go ahead and apply a tourniquet properly in the dark. Now, my first run, this went really smooth and I was happy with it. Tonight, not really quite so much. So I once again did this by feel. I didn't try to refocus my nods to see it very close distance. I had the guy's arm under the tourniquet at first. I fixed that. But when I got the tourniquet set up, I had the windlass almost under the leg. And it was really pretty awkward to work with here. So a little more practice. I could have done this better, but it does go on. As you can see, it takes me a little extra time here. Once I've got the tourniquet fully applied, I'm going to grab the dummy's magazine of ammo that has 28 rounds of frangibles in it, as well as his rifle, which is just an iron-sighted AR carbine. I run to the shoot house, load once I get to the shoot house, and then I then have to engage 9 steel targets. A couple different types of target, but you got 9 targets, you got 28 rounds, you have to get 2 hits on each. So you need 18 hits, you've got 10 rounds to spare. I'm getting a little bit better at point shooting, not great still. But finally, moving forward, I'm able to get both hits on that one. This is going better for me. There we go, 2 hits on that. This is going better for me than my run with the high point because I'm actually able, I do a much better job of bringing the gun up into position. I'm not using the sights through my nods because iron sights through nods are really hard, but I've got the gun in a much better shooting position and I'm able to get all of these hits. So we've got a couple more engagements here. This shoot house was awesome. It was totally, got you totally lost, but the ROs were really good at maneuvering you through it. There's our last target, and I ran out after I got 1 hit and then went dry. So I have 1 penalty on this stage. Even having 1 put me pretty far down the rankings. It was a relatively slow time because of my tourniquet performance, and I ended up 83rd. Now, next stage is by common declaration the best stage of the match. This is Trenches of Ukraine, sponsored by T-Rex Arms. This is a nice natural terrain trench system that was put together by the One Shepherd guys that we're shooting out of. Now, from each of these bunker ports, usually there's 1 target you can see downrange. And you can see on the camera here, we've got a chem light on each of the targets so that you can spot them. The trick, though, is those chem lights do not produce heat, so they're actually not visible in the thermal scope. Now, I'm running this with my nods flipped up so that I can get my head right up nice and close behind the thermal scope, and it means I have a bit more trouble than people in the active division when I'm trying to locate those targets. I kind of have to look with the naked eye, spot the chem light, which you could do. They're very dim without nods on, but you could see them. So I find it, and then I bring my head down onto the scope and pick up the target. Now, once I was able to locate, figure out where to look, the targets were pretty distinctive. They have a nice geometric outline, even though they're not heated. As you can see, they're not that hard to spot them. This bunker, by the way, there's a big tree right in front of it, so you actually have 2 engagements here, one from the left, one from the right. And the second engagement at this position gave me a lot of trouble trying to find where the target was. The perspective from the camera here is a little different. You can really obviously see that chem light up and above to the left of my head, but it was hard to spot from my shooting position. And in fact, I probably should have gotten to a little bit better shooting position in order to get this. I had a little bit of recon by fire there, and then maneuver around. The RO is trying to give me a little bit of help spotting the target.
Orange chem light.
There we go. And there it is. Now I'm able to move a bit, find that guy, and make my hits on it. Of course, I get 2 hits, then run out of ammo, so I have to reload again. Once again, I'm using a chest rig here, and I'm putting mags back into the chest rig because having a belt on the outside of this snow camo oversuit wasn't, well, I didn't do it. I suppose in retrospect, I could have saved some time if I did do it. But we do require shooters to keep all of their personal gear on them throughout the match. So we get to the end bunker here. There's 1 more target to engage, and then you have to do the whole thing going backwards. So you end at the position where you started. This one also gives me a little bit of trouble to find. It's a smaller target farther out. From my position, it's kind of hiding behind a tree. That white spot in white spots, those are actually shots that I missed to the left that landed in the tree, and you can see the hot tail end of the bullet through the thermal, which is really cool. So I'm not entirely convinced about my 0 on this Clarion. I think it may have gotten bumped at some point in here because throughout the match, I'll have issues with the 0. I had it nicely zeroed when I left home, and for the closer range, larger targets, it wasn't a problem. Like that one's super easy. By the way, the Boombox with Q scope on it is an amazingly quiet gun. It's this is a 12-inch barrel. It's got a big can. I'm shooting 300 grain subsonic bullets. They make a fantastic loud clang on target, but they're actually totally hearing safe. If it weren't for all the other people around without hearing safe guns, I wouldn't have had to wear ear protection while I was doing this shooting. So I got a second reload, finish off that target. There we go. I've got just a couple more bunkers left. This was generally a pretty good stage for me. Things went slow, largely because of the 2 that I had some trouble finding. And I actually the timer beeped and the RO didn't notice it. So I actually went a couple seconds over the par time, and the RO just decided to give me par plus 1 missed target for my last shot over time. So I ended up with 1 penalty. Again, pretty far down in the rankings, and it's because of the time taken to have to find the targets. Next stage was another really fun one, Meth Lab in the Woods, brought to you by Varstaleka, the finest. Oh man, there's a flashbang. You start this stage by flashbanging the meth house, going in. Oh, did I mention Mitch, one of the design engineers from Q, also shot the match with us with his boombox with a full auto lower. So we swapped lowers so that I could use full auto, clearing the meth house here, which was a lot of fun. Unfortunately, the fun ended right about here, where I got totally lost in the meth house. By this stage, it had started raining on us. My nods were completely fogged up, and inside that shoot house, I could essentially see nothing whatsoever. And I got into a corner in the shoot house and was totally turned around staring at a wall. So the RO gave me some guidance. You can see here with the ops in, if there's not light inside, you can't see anything, and the recording kind of sucks. Once we get outside into the moonlight again, the light comes back and it helps. Now, the issue here is this stage ended with 3 hits on a steel target at about 100 yards from 3 different positions. Now, the target was big. It was a full-size silhouette, and the guys in the active division really had no problem finding it. In fact, the first night when I did this with a high point, I had no problem finding it at all. You can see I've circled it right there. I am not able to discern that target through the thermal at all. I tried flipping down my nods and looking for it through my nods, and I couldn't see anything because my nods were all fogged up from the rain, which you can't really see here. But man, the combination of rain and we didn't have a chem light on this target, so this one was, frankly, it was impossible for me. I just could not find the target. I did a little bit of recon by fire here to try and spot it. I figured, things that might look like a target, if I hit them, they'll make a really nice big ding. The RO's doing a really nice job here, and man, I was so close to it there, but I couldn't see it. I just was guessing. The RO is really helpful trying to walk me onto the target, but we can't see impacts. And I ultimately ended up just giving up on this stage. So sorry, Jordan, my camera guy, is trying to also help me onto target and dropped the camera down. So unfortunately on this, the thermal, the target visibility totally destroyed the stage for me. I ended up with 9 penalties. That's a quarter of the penalties I got overall in the match because I just couldn't find that target. It was an easy one to hit if I could see it. So big lesson learned for me on sometimes cold steel is really easy to see and sometimes it's really, really hard. So I was close to the very bottom of this stage. No one else really had trouble with it like I did. Now, stage 6, the Field of Destroyed Dreams from B.E. Meyers. This one should have gone really well. I was able to see the targets nicely. So as you can see, they're not as visible as on some of the stages, but no trouble at all spotting those guys. It's a pair of full-size silhouettes out at 100. This is another stage where a combination of, I'm not really sure my 0 was totally on, plus I'm starting to get tired, I'm starting to get fatigued, it's cold. I'm actually pretty warm under all of this Varstaleka wool that I'm wearing, but it was getting to be, we've been out for several hours shooting, and I just didn't perform all that well here. So the stage description was you hit each target twice, 1, 2, 1, 2, from 3 positions on the VTAC, and then you go down and hit each target twice from a whole sequence of shooting positions. We're going to go over the table, and we've got these 3 shooting barricades, and you have to hit each target through each hole and then work your way all the way back. So there's a hit, and there's a hit. It's really awesome listening to the intense clang that 300 grain subsonic drops onto those steel plates. I like to joke that the timer had trouble catching the sound of the gunshot, but it would actually pick up the sound of the bullet impact, which is not quite true, but close, close. So this should have been a really good stage for me, and I can't blame it really on anything, essentially really anything other than myself. The gun ran perfectly, just reloading here. 20 round mags, by the way, the Boombox, which is still a prototype. They'll be out, I think, later this year. They should be actually commercially available, but uses standard AR 308P mags, or SR25 mags, AKA. And gun ran perfectly. The targets were nice and visible. It's just my shooting was not very good. I was slow here. I need some practice picking up the targets, I think, a little bit faster. And see, I thought that was a good hit, moved off the target. It ended up actually being a miss, and I had to come back to it. These full-size silhouettes are big enough that they make up for a lot of bad shots, but a couple of those, the crosshair was pretty effectively on the target when I pulled the trigger. It's, by the way, one of the nice things about thermal scopes is being able to have a recording of exactly what the scope sees. So I'm starting to hold off to the right a little bit to try and compensate, but that's really a guess on my part. The idea of this stage, by the way, was just to really test your marksmanship ability, which is exactly what it did. For the match overall, we upped all of the par times on all the stages to 4 minutes, 240 seconds, which allowed us to increase the round count on stages like this. So if you were a really good shooter, if your gear is squared away and you were capable of making these hits, this stage went reasonably fast. We had a lot of times, as I recall it, in the 100 to 150 seconds for the shooters who are really good. But if you were on the struggle bus with me, it was a long ride. You get to a point like this in the stage, and you're kind of thinking, like, I've been doing this forever. How is this stage still going on? This is my last shots through the port. At this point, I'm actually getting kind of excited that I'm going to be able to clean the stage. Maybe make it my first stage without any penalties. You go back over the table and back to the VTAC barricade for the last 3 sets of engagements, again, through 2 holes and then 1 ledge off the side of the VTAC to find the targets. There were only 13 people in passive division. I was one of them, so 12 others. And there we go. I ran out of time with 4 targets left unengaged. So par and 4 penalties on that one. This was a disappointing stage for me. I really should have been able to do better. Stage 7, the Circle of Doom, sponsored by Q, makers of the Boombox. This was, without a doubt, unanimously voted the least fun stage of the match. The purpose here was to try and force you to read material, use your nods to identify information, and then use that to engage in a target. But we had some issues during the staff match. We ended up redesigning the stage slightly to make sure that it would at least run smoothly for our main match competitors. And so instead, you'd flip over one of the mines. There would be a number on it. You call out the number, and the RO reads you your target package. So in this case, I had to shoot the bottom targets on the spinners. I think I had to actually ask for clarification on that. You got 1 opportunity to ask the RO to repeat your instructions. If you had to ask more than once, that was a penalty. So I have to shoot the bottom targets on each of the 4 spinner plates. Then I have to hit a popper. I just wandered right past the popper. We were still having some rain here. I still had some issues with foggy nods, and I'm having trouble, well, frankly, I had zoomed in with the scope. I probably should have left this. I think this was at 4x. I should have left it at 2. That would have been better. There's the popper. Come on. There we go. And then the last shot on target is a high value shot. So you pull the magazine, that leaves you 1 round in the gun, and you have 1 chance to make your hit. If you make it, great. Your gun is now thoroughly unloaded because it only had 1 round. You fired it. The 180 safety rule no longer applies. If you miss, well, gun's still unloaded, but you get a penalty. So this target is only at like 30 yards, but I am just having an impossible time trying to find it. Part of the issue here is I have left the Clarion focused for longer range shooting like we had on the previous 100-yard bay. And so these close range targets are kind of blurry. A kind of blurry steel, plus it's not heated and it blends into the background. plus too much magnification is a really bad combination. So having finished the target package, you bring the mine back out here and flip over another mine and repeat the whole process a second time. So I'll have a slightly different presentation here, but they were all some combination of shots on the spinners, then shoot the popper, then a high value shot on the mini silhouette to end. So let's do this all again. This is going painfully slow for me because of, well, difficulty in finding the targets. That's kind of a recurring theme here, isn't it? The Clarion was actually probably not, definitely was not my best choice in a thermal scope. Oh, this is all on me, by the way. You can see in the target view, everything's just totally black. And I'm trying to figure out, like, what the heck is going on? Is it fogged up? I actually turn the scope off here and turn it back on. So the recording ends, and that's all the scope view I can give you. But turning it off and on didn't fix it. It's like, what the heck happened to my scope? Like, things were bad before, but now literally I just can't see anything. Turns out, oh, the scope cap bounced up and I didn't notice it. So once I figure that out and drop the, reopen the scope cap, then I'm able to pick up the targets here. And I can actually start shooting. So hits on the spinners. You don't have to spin them, you just have to, we use them as static plates, you just have to hit them. And then a popper, which I have to find again, and then a high value target. Anyway, as I was saying, the Clarion wasn't my best choice. It's a larger, higher magnification optic from AGM. It has a 2x and a 3x setting that, 2x has a wider field view, 3x is more optical magnification, but less field of view. And I'm, by the way, completely unable to find that static target here. Par out on it, I get a penalty for not hitting it plus par time, but still not bad. A lot of people did badly on this stage. All right, next up from Gorilla and Brownells. By the way, a huge shout out to Gorilla for providing me the ammunition to shoot an 8.6 Blackout Boombox semi-auto through this whole match. That was not cheap of them, and I definitely would not have been able to do it without their help. So this stage 8 here is our obstacle course. There are a whole series of shooting positions here. You're going under and around walls. There's an elevated position. There's a tunnel to crawl through. And every time you get to a shooting position, you have to make 2 hits on this target that's at about 130 yards. It's nice and visible. As you can see, I didn't have any issues seeing it, but I did end up having trouble actually hitting it. And that would lead to me taking more time than I should have, and ultimately parring out on this stage as well. I don't think I actually had a single stage on this run that I didn't have penalties. So I'm really not sure where my 0 was. I felt like it was off, but then I did a really good job making the high value hits on this stage. I got 3 out of the 4 of them. And I gave the rifle back to the guys from Q at the end of the match. So I didn't have a chance to do a post-mortem and check the 0 and see if this was partly the 0 shifting for some reason, or just entirely me and my shooting. So last year, by the way, I also used an AGM thermal scope. Last year I used their Rattler, which is a smaller version, that same tech, basically, same sensor, I believe. Well, slightly smaller sensor, slightly smaller lens, but it's only a 2x. And frankly, I would prefer a scope here that allowed me to shoot at 1x. 2 was nice for the longer targets like this, bumping up to 4 at the worst, but the scope goes all the way up to 16x for presumably hog hunting. And I for this sort of match, I have absolutely no interest in anything more than 4, and I'd frankly prefer a native 1 power over 2. So AGM loaned me the Clarion, which is why I went ahead and used it, but it was bigger and heavier than it really needed to be. There is also an issue with thermal scopes that they have a relatively short eye box. It's not an optical eye box, it's just a digital screen inside the end of the scope, but you have to get fairly close to see it. And it's really easy to have your helmet and or nods interfere with your sight picture, getting your face into the right position to see the scope. So that never really, well, we'll get to the next stage. It did prevent me from making some hits, but in general, except in very specialized cases, it just was a slowing influence. It was kind of friction on the whole shooting process of make sure the helmet's high enough up, or rest the lip of the helmet on the back of the scope to make sure that it's out of the way. You know, I'm making hits here. I'm doing well. I've made it all the way through to the halfway point in the obstacle course and turn around and I'm working my way back. But these should have been shots that were one shot, one hit. When I ran this stage last year, it wasn't identical, but it was a very similar set of engagements. And I think I actually shot it completely clean last year. Not a single miss. And that was with a thermal scope from the same company, and it was with a Q fix in 8.6. So same caliber, a bolt action rifle instead of a semi. And I should have been able to do that well this year, but I didn't. So we're approaching the end here, but man, as you can see, I'm just having trouble getting these hits. I'm estimating where I think the hold needs to be. I'm still not sure. It's unfortunate. I'm still not sure exactly where the zero was, but here we go. 2 hits from this position, maybe. Come on, hold it together, McCollum. Nope, I'm out of ammo, and there's the timer. So par out, 420 seconds of penalties, 7 shots missed, 7 targets not engaged, which, as you can see, still above the 50th percentile. Now, stage 1, we move back up to the beginning of the match. I apologize here, the main camera didn't kick in until I was a little ways through. So you get the scope camera first. We are shooting through a VTAC barricade. We have 2 targets in I think it's a 75-yard bay or so. And you just have to hit 4 hits on each from each position in the VTAC. 1, 2, 1, 2. So there's 1. This should be a pretty easy stage. This is another one that I'm getting tired. My shooting's not that great. And the biggest issue for me here, in fact, I do finish this stage before the end of par time. However, on the first VTAC barricade, there were 3 ports specified to use. And one of them was a small horizontalish port. And I just literally could not get the boombox behind it with the Clarion. Well, the boombox would fit behind it. I couldn't get a sight picture through the scope with my helmet, crouching down on the ground. And I could tell that if I fought through and made those hits, it was going to cost me enough time that I was certainly going to par out. And I made the choice that I was better off skipping those 4 hits and making all the rest of them. So I abandoned that shooting position, took 4 penalties for doing so, ran to the other VTAC. I'm going to proceed to make all of these hits. They're not difficult hits to make. They're just, this is how consistent are you? How many misses are you going to make before you actually make the hits? On this particular one, the thermal did me some nice favors because, as you can see, both of these targets are pretty visible. That one's a little bit harder than the other, but that popper's not hard for me to spot here. The left side target in particular gave a lot of people trouble. Definitely in the passive division, and even some of the people in the active division had a hard time spotting that target even with IR illumination. It is kind of just a weird artifact of this particular shooting bay and the lighting conditions you get in it, that targets, there's nothing obscuring this target. It's set forward from the bay, from the berm a bit, and yet they can still be pretty hard to see. We had a very similar situation last year at the stage that was in this bay. Last year it was the right-hand target that was really hard to see. This year it was the left-hand one. But through that Clarion, through the thermal scope, not a problem. So overall through the match, there was really a lot of change, or it was unpredictable, I should say, which targets would be easy for me to see and which ones would be really difficult. So, overall here, the gun was great. I cannot wait to actually get my hands on a boombox to have for myself. This one, as I mentioned, I had to give back to Q because it's still a prototype gun. But I'm really looking forward to it. It'll be expensive as crap to shoot, but super fun, extremely quiet. And yeah, I'm looking forward to that. They are going to have a 7.62 NATO version of the boombox as well, by the way, just like they did with the fix. So come on. I've got 2 hits left here, plus the last position, which once again, I'm going to skip. Oh, sorry, 4 hits. There we go. 3 and 1 last shot for the match. There it is. So 480 seconds in penalties, 8 targets not engaged, puts me in 80th place. Overall here, I felt like I was really let down by a combination of the optic and my own shooting abilities. I came in 81st out of 114, so still not totally at the bottom, but embarrassingly low down in the rankings for the guy who designed, who ran the match. A huge thanks to the One Shepherd Leadership Institute for being our cadre of squad leaders and range officers. They were fantastic. This could absolutely never have happened without their assistance. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed the video. We'll be back next year with Moons Out 2025. Thanks for watching.